un'edizione che quest'anno celebra i 25 anni della fondazione del Consorzio, un'edizione che volevamo organizzare in un modo speciale, ma come sapete gli eventi hanno preso il sopravvento e la realtà è andata ben oltre la fantasia.
Welcome to this edition that is celebrating the 25th anniversary. So we are holding this meeting in a virtual environment. We are broadcasting from TV studios. And there are two protagonists. First of all, the pandemic, COVID-19, the invisible enemy we're still fighting. And of course, we are trying to counter this enemy with NET, which was the antidote that helped us continue with our professional activity, but also to keep alive our interpersonal relationships. So yin against yang, looking for balance. With respect to the title of this day, Back to the Future, well, this is a good omen. There's also a hope to win back our future as soon as possible, but also the hope to go back to normality that is based on two great themes we're going to focus on today. So the digital environment and sustainability. Before coming to the agenda, I would like to thank the sponsors for this day, our friends, that are many that you can find listed here, that are the companies, our friends, that are sponsors that helped us organize this conference that will start this afternoon and will end in late afternoon. Now, let's have a look at the agenda. In the morning, we're going to have a virtual meeting, then thematic specialist workshops in which distinguished international speakers will participate. Well, the meeting is going to be a mosaic of keynote lectures and panelists. There's going to be a prologue, 4 thematic sessions of some 30 minutes each, and a conclusion that will take place around 12:45. So the first session will focus on Europe, on European policies for the digital environment. The second session will be focusing on internet exchange points. It will be a fast tour around the world. In 30 minutes, we will connect with the US and with China. The third session will focus on networks and applications, and we will focus on e-learning and smart working, our two experiences we have gained over the past few months. And then a multidisciplinary test. We're going to have an engineer, an IT specialist, a sociologist, an economist. We're going to ask them to explain us why the future is not going to be what we expected in the past. And then in the closing remarks, we're going to hear from the Undersecretary from the Ministry for Economic Development, Gianpaolo Manzella, who is going to help us draw the conclusions of this morning.
Interazione al corso della giornata.
So, technical details. Like we've done in past years, we're going to be inserting a code which is NAM 2020, and this is going to enable us to ask questions to the speakers and also to answer some of the questions that are going to be asked in the course of the day. The details for today's conference are on meeting.namex.it, and there you will find all the technical details, the timing, and so on. At this point, I would like to ask a first question that I would like to give you. The first question is a forecast with regard to when we will go back to normal. There are 3 answers by December 2021, by the first quarter of 2021. And at this point, I would say that we're all ready, and we're going to see the video when this story all began. This is a story that I was told by the protagonists. Paolo Bevilacqua. Well, Bevilacqua had this idea, that is, that of creating the first NAP, a place where we would solve the problems of the time. Well, I had the address of a Unidata writer that a router that was in the door next to my office. So this would go round the world virtually, or round Italy, from Milan to Amsterdam, and then go back to some other place in Paris, and it would reach the office next door, the router of Unidata that was on the desk next to mine, or the room next to mine. And I wondered, why on earth should this happen? So on the basis of the experience that we had in other countries, the first exchange points were set up in America, and Tullio Zanone, Filoverso, and somebody else in Unidata, very smart people in this field, Paolo Bevilacqua in particular, Silvano Tocelli, and also someone else. Well, we thought that we might set up an exchange point in Rome on the premises of Caspor, which was in the basement at the University of Rome La Sapienza. So we started putting together some providers who had joined this initiative with MC Link, UniAcket, Ciccio Messere from Agora, and Caspor. They too had a network, and they were providers as well in the university arena. I would like to make a dedication to someone who passed away recently, Ezio Bosso, who left us with this phrase, which is very powerful. And here it is: a smile is a musical instrument without time, without age, that can be played by everyone, both young and old people. There's a joie de vivre here, and also a determination of never to give up. And this is something that we need right now. So before starting our 4 sessions, we're going to start with an overview of what Namex has done during the year, that will be presented by Renato Brunetta, who is the CEO of Namex. Welcome, Renato. Let's see if we're consistent with the protocol. No, we're quite, we're at the right distance. This is a meter, so we're at more than 2 meters away. So I congratulate the organizers for having provided these safe conditions. So, President of Namex, Renato Brunetti, he's also CEO of the first company that went public with Lime in the first week after the lockdown this year. So I really want to congratulate you on your courage. So in a world that is not growing, Namex continues to grow. So what can you tell us about the distinctive features of Namex and makes it a point of reference in Italy? Well, 2019 was a year in which we grew quite steadily. We have some slides to show you. We have grown in all entrepreneurial activities and consortium activities, and this is very important for Namex. All the trends are positive. 32% increase in networks that are connected, therefore consortium members, 43% increase in traffic, 55% increase in interconnections and services that are exchanged within and throughout Namex, and 33% growth in revenues. So even though we are a non-profit consortium, this is important because money is important for everyone. And we confirm that our growth has continued this year as well. Well, thank you. Nobody can stand still. Some new data centers are going to be opened up in Rome. And what does this mean for the Roman ecosystem, and what changes for Namex in particular? Well, this is an important phenomenon for Rome, but also for the internet system in Italy. and that is that the large data centers that are present only in the north of Italy and in Milan in particular, well, they are now being set up also in Rome. And this is extremely important, both for the growth of the local ecosystem, but also for the resilience of the country. So this is a sort of equilibrium between what is being done in the north of Italy, that is connected to the rest of Europe, and also now the center. These two data centers that are neutral, and this is important, in Rome, they're going to make our system more resilient. And this is extremely important with regard to the current situation and considering what has happened recently. Now, what about the companies in Italy? What do they need to do to start growing again? Well, firms and businesses, companies need to go back to work. We know that the new economic scenario is going to be totally different from the past. The companies in our sector, the digital sector, internet, play a crucial role. In particular, a large number of small and medium-sized companies that deal with internet, that are service providers, that provide applications and so on. All this universe is going to be very important. And the internet showed great resilience during the COVID situation, with a lot of smart working going on and so on. If this had not been possible, we would have had a true catastrophe. So the resilience of the internet is a positive element. It is something that enables mankind to keep going. So we had the intelligence, we had the gift of creating this structure. Well, thank you, Renato. And while the next keynote speaker is getting ready to take the floor, we're going to be showing a bit of ads, some advertisements.
Anni in Namex. Nato per scherzo.
25 years in Namex. It grew and became a national pole, and most of the traffic is generated by the northern companies, the companies in the north. We have succeeded in having the second pole survive, a second pole here in the capital of Italy, in Rome. And all the companies pay for this service, and the companies are mostly located in the north. So this is quite a miracle, I would say. Namex is a miracle. It is a child that is loved by everyone.
SonicWall firewalls and SonicWall secure mobile access appliances. Network security plus access security. Never trade CPU cycles between DPI SSL and SSL VPN again. To learn more, visit sonicwall.com.
connected world.
Con Fritzbox avrai direttamente a casa la connessione internet veloce del futuro, adatto a tutti gli operatori. Facile e rapido da installare, Fritzbox 7590 è la scelta ideale per ogni connessione DSL. Con il sistema operativo intelligente, la tua connessione sarà costantemente sicura e aggiornata. Collega tutti i telefoni alla tua rete. Fidati del modem router più premiato dai test di qualità. Fritzbox 7590. Porta a casa ora il top per la tua connessione.
We connect companies in Europe, North America and Asia. We have 30,000 kilometers of fiber optic network. We are Avalon Campus, the largest Italian private hub for neutral colocation.
Prima sessione dedicata all'Europa.
First session devoted to Europe, the post-pandemic economy in Europe. And in Brussels, we have a video produced by the Commission that is a summary of what has happened in the last few months. The title of the video is Digital Health. Osserviamo le... Abbiamo parlato con i nostri familiari, abbiamo assistito a webinar in linea, abbiamo utilizzato internet con sicurezza e quindi abbiamo ricevuto informazioni e non disinformazione. Abbiamo esaminato e visto tutti i negozi online, abbiamo visto le tecnologie digitali che venivano usate per la ricerca sui vaccini e sui farmaci, in tutti gli aspetti della tua vita. Digital è di aiuto e questo continuerà a mantenerci al sicuro e starà con noi, saremo più forti insieme.
Siamo molto grati a Roberto Viola, direttore generale
We are very grateful to Mr. Viola from DG Connect to be with us. DG Connect is the point of reference for our sector because that is where the strategies are developed for a smart and inclusive and sustainable development and for all those aspects that have to do with the information society. In fact, the minimum size in order to intervene and solve problems and seize opportunities, that level is Europe, and therefore Europe is at the center of our interest and in our hearts. Good morning, Cristoforo. Thank you, and good morning to everyone who is listening to us. You are a great Italian who is working at the European level. We have lent you to Europe, so to speak. Well, when you say a great Italian, you're referring to my belly. No, of course not. Well, let's go back to what happened in the last few months and what DG Connect did during the pandemic. So how were you involved and what was the role of DG Connect during the peak of the pandemic? Well, first of all, I would like to answer your question, but first of all, I would like to explain I'm here. I don't want to boast, but I receive hundreds of requests every day. But I decided to accept your invitation because I wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Namex. Thank you to all the Italian ISPs and to all the internet operators in Italy because they did a wonderful job. And thanks to you. Well, half of Italy, we're talking about the south. Italy was connected to the rest of the world and people were able to work from home and students were able to attend their lessons. And we also had a more structured telemedicine at work, and all this was made possible thanks to you. And the biggest thanks go dutifully to the health workers, but also an applause is dutiful to the internet operators. So I'm here to say thank you first and foremost. The other thing I wanted to say is this. I believe that the internet infrastructure in Italy deserves more. The work that's being done is extraordinary, but I think that more attention should be paid by the public bodies to investments in independent data centers, independent internet and common spaces, because these are all important engines for relaunching Italy and Europe. I think we're going to be speaking about this during the interview, but when we consider the funds that the European Union has made available, or they're putting them, they are about to approve them for under this very imposive program, well, you know that there are two lines that are important for relaunching Europe. One is green and the digital. And in the digital, an important role is for connectivity, data, and the internet. And now I would like to answer the question you asked me. Well, we were active. We worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The first front was health, the health sector. We tried to help the health workers using the technologies to find the best solutions. So we worked on artificial intelligence, and now we have tens of hospitals that are using AI for imaging and diagnosis of images. We also worked on the possibility of understanding the structure of the virus and of trying to find solutions through a platform, a unique platform in the world, a supercomputer using AI and using all the formulae that are known to try to understand what this virus is. And also we worked on robotics for disinfection, for automatic testing. We worked on new solutions in the area of robotics. We also made an important investment with regard to a call addressed to companies to submit bids for 51 million euros in the digital area. And so in this area, we have worked with great passion and with great intensity. My iPad is running out of power. I'm sorry. And then connectivity. So we did very painstaking work to try and provide all the applications and requests for streaming from home. Our commissioner asked YouTube to lower the speed, 30% less on the whole of the European market. And we monitored, together with the European regulators, we monitored the quality of the network, and we were constantly in touch with ICANN to monitor the essential nodes of the internet network and to have an understanding of the situation in real time. And thanks to you, most of these things were done. And then we also worked on those famous applications that enable us to track all the people who came in contact with the people who were infected, and common lines were adopted in Europe, and now we have a solution through an app, the app that is being prepared and will be soon available throughout Europe. Well, thank you. Please allow me to add a comment here. Recently, you also published facts on 5G, and at the time of fake news, this helped us understand what 5G is, what it's going to, the things it's going to bring, how it's going to change things. But looking to the future, could you tell us something with regard to the next generation Europe? What this new plan, how is it going to relaunch the digital? What is the role of digital according to this European plan? Well, if you allow me to say a joke, it's only 50% of the plan, because the European Commission clearly said that this plan is dedicated to the transformation of the digital in Europe. In actual fact, there are things that have to do with the reforms and structures and also resilience, Europe's capacity to withstand another crisis, which we hope will never happen. So these are complementary aspects. So we have the programs that are the long-term programs in the 7-year plan starting from 2021. And there we have 3 programs. One is digital, and it's totally new, which is called Digital Europe, which is not a research program or project. It is a program that is practical. It aims at making it possible to create European data spaces, applying artificial intelligence and super calculation, and applying these methods to medicine, transport. So this program is it's worth 10 billion euros, more or less, just under 10 billion, 9.2 to be precise. Alongside this, we have a program for infrastructure that is Connecting Europe facility, and this is a program which is funding Wi-Fi 42, and it's a 2 billion program for infrastructure, cross-border 5G, motorways, the super motorways, and then we have a second part of it that is 5G for you. And so this will involve Namex and all other operators, and connectivity over long distances to improve the quality of the internet, both at the European level and at the worldwide level. And then we have a program that is dedicated to research, Horizon, and that its digital arm, and a very good program for health, which is called Health for You. Now, this package, then we have the structural funds, there are other programs, but then we have the emergency package, which is a huge program with billions of euros at stake. And this too sees green and digital as being the main pillars. So this has been approved. And secondly, we want projects and ideas with regard to next generation Europe. There's no time to lose. This is an opportunity that cannot be missed, and companies like yours need to take action, because interconnectivity, digital, and so on are an important element in the relaunching of Italy. We have a question, but before hearing this question, I confirm your idea that this is a program for doing. This is an excellent slogan to get going.
You know that better than me. They are the advocates of digital, and we've got lots of them. So I think you are the players. You are the ones doing things. So I'm very pleased to be with you today. So let's see what question we have received for you. So it's a question regarding the future. So we still got 6 months of work in 2020. You've still done a lot. We've got 2 questions, actually. So what are the next appointments for 2020 regarding the work schedule of DG Connect? And then a question that I might have asked, really. DESI data on the positioning of Italy in European rankings have just been published, and we are always ranking among the last countries, so we seem to be a hopeless country. So do we have hope to climb up this ranking? With respect to the appointments scheduled for the second part of 2020, can you tell us something about what's going to happen over the next 6 months? Yes, lots of things. First of all, public consultation processes, and I hope you're going to participate. There's one currently underway regarding the Digital Service Act, which will be a summary of everything that the governments have been doing regarding digital platforms in Europe. So the GDPR, etc. So this is going to become, hopefully, an international benchmark regarding regulation for platforms like these. Then we're going to keep working on the things I've mentioned already. So we will focus on Digital Europe. We will focus on connecting facilities. And we will publish our schedules. But obviously, the first step is to have our investments approved, because in order to work, we need certainty in terms of money, in terms of resources. And I hope that over the next few weeks, over the next few months, the heads of states and governments might come to an agreement on the package of measures we have presented, and quite soon we're going to start working on concrete projects. But the fact that right now we have to wait for our proposals to be approved should not stop you from putting forward other proposals to us or to other Italian authorities. This can be done at any time, and it must be done because we need ideas right now. So whatever idea is welcome. With respect to the DESI question, well, if you are sorry, think about how sorry I am, because I'm responsible for DESI myself, so I have to acknowledge this situation. Well, the group that has made these calculations is led by an Italian, so the fact that we are suffering, well, this can be easily confirmed. You don't need to be a Nobel Prize laureate to know what Italy should do, because we've been published 4 or 5 of these reports. We should need someone knocking our doors, asking about these parameters, how these parameters have been set and how things can be improved. But this never happened, unfortunately. It happened in many countries that have come to us. We have organized workshops. We have elaborated on how things could be improved. There have been several political changes in Italy, and this, of course, did not help. I would like to thank Minister Pisano, though, because we started a very fruitful dialogue with him, and hopefully we will manage to have a more structured work and being able also to understand how to help Italy to climb up this ranking and maybe at least reach the Champions League area or the European Cup area, to borrow a metaphor from the football world. With respect to the ultra-wide band and wideband, well, we need to clarify things. I would like to thank Roberto Viola for the time he has devoted to us, and see you soon. Thank you, Cristoforo. Thank you, everyone. Well, let's now move on to an economist, from an engineer to an economist, a particularly brilliant one. The second keynote speaker is Carlo Alberto Carnevale Maffei, who's an economist, is a professor at the Bocconi University in Milan. He's also a very active person on the social media. Let's say he's a very important influencer. If I recall correctly, Carlo Alberto, we met for the first time virtually many years ago on Twitter,
Morando 2020, ma tu sei diventato
well,
molto più famoso.
you have become more famous than yours truly. Well, you're right. Thank you and welcome back. I think it was 17 people on Twitter back then. It was 2007, 2008. Well, today Twitter is a huge public place. And we often talk about what we have to do as a country system, but also as Europe, as my colleague just said, to rise up to the challenges of the future. Today we're going to talk about your recent essay, very interesting one, The Digital Empire Strikes Back. Well, it's halfway between Nouvelle Histoire and 2001 An Odyssey in Space. So I would like to ask Carlo Alberto, who is an economist, to say something about the state of play of the crisis and the extent of the crisis we have been experiencing over the past few months. I think you've got a few slides to show. Yes, please. If you could please show slide number 2 to show you that from an economic standpoint, we are dancing. We are dancing hard. Could you please put on slide number 2? Well, this is a play upon words, referring to 3 letters, L-U-V. L means no recovery, U means a recovery that's going to take a long time, or a V, an immediate rebound. So my idea is that we are closer to a W, really, because uncertainty is having an impact on financial markets that record some ups and downs. The OECD and the IMF estimates basically say this: great volatility, great oscillation, because the virus has shown that national institutions are unable to face this problem. If we see slide number 3, we can see a difference between the countries that were prepared and those who were not. So technology matters. Technology plays a key role, because technology is not only a chapter, but it's a new technological and institutional infrastructure. If you see the graph on slide 3, you can see the impact of the virus is the same for everyone, but the preparedness of the institutions is not the same for everyone. So it was the ability of countries like South Korea or Taiwan to show how the impact could be minimized 2 or 3%, whereas in our country it's 10% of GDP. This not only because we have a lower DESI index, but because our political institutional system of businesses and citizens is unable to react as a collectivity, whereas the internet is precisely this, so the first brave attempt to offer a coordination mechanism to the world. Someone has used it in a smart way for prevention purposes, or we heard from Roberto the technologies that are available that were put in place by Europe with some delay, but they were put in place, the interoperability of technologies, because it doesn't make any sense to consider healthcare as being something regional when there's a pandemic. So it's not biology that is causing damage, but it's the lack of preparation of politicians. And when this situation has an impact on technological processes that are the new forms of coordination, then we destroy our values. On slide number 4, you can see that value destruction will be absorbed by an explosion of public debt. We will reach 160, 170% in Italy. Slide number 3 of the IMF anticipates a 3% increase in the GDP to debt ratio. Well, now, in the big belly of white whale, which is the European Central Bank, and this is what is going to happen. Never in history have we seen an absorption of the economic shock by central banks. Well, this shock hit the supply side and the demand side as well, because the countries that were not prepared, and I would like to remind you that South Korea and Taiwan never had generalized lockdown because they did prevention. They were prepared from the SARS times, of course, but we moved from negationism to panic. And this 10% of GDP is no asteroid. It is the price of inadequate policy and institutions and infrastructure that was inadequate. As Roberto said, we survived our lockdown thanks to the internet. Yes, we survived, though, but we were unable to use the internet, which was the perfect instrument to communicate. And if we think about the boom of papers and international corporations, it was thanks to the internet. If we're going to have vaccines in a record time, we were going to owe that to the internet, because the internet was born as a model of cooperation among scientists. It has proven to be an extraordinary cooperation instrument between scientists, an extraordinary instrument. But the reaction of the national governments was pathetic, including, unfortunately, many Western countries, let alone the US. The US is one of the countries having suffered the hardest impact. So the impact of the virus is another lesson. Like technological viruses are global, also biological viruses are global. We haven't understood yet that internet, just like biology, is showing that our provincial, parochial model is simply faulty, and the citizens are paying the price of all this. Thank you. Well, the W metaphor has, of course, rang a bell. So a tragedy in the Western world and a positive experience in the Eastern world. But let's come to your essay. That shows that nothing is going to be like before. Well, you compare the pandemic as a blitzkrieg. And you say in particular that COVID-19 is a unique opportunity to recover two fundamental components of competitiveness that are productivity, but also solidarity, which was lost. Could you please elaborate on this? Well, the virus remembers that we are waves in the same ocean, as Seneca used to say. There's no point in fragmenting healthcare systems in regions or countries. We have to rewrite a global social contract because we need solidarity. We need to rediscover the concept of mutual aid. An interconnected world has been interrupted because we were unable to manage control cycles from beginning to end, and that's unacceptable in 2020. Why the internet plays a key role? Why the digital is a blitzkrieg? Because this shock that affected the supply side has caused a positive impact on the demand side. Well, all the excuses, well, the internet is for young people, the video can't be used, well, were set aside. Now, old maids are playing cards on the internet and post on Instagram. So, of course, barriers have been brought down in this regard. Barriers that were justified or not, that were stifling and blocking this development. So, productivity and solidarity are the big wave of the internet ocean. Now, we have reached Middle Earth. We have reached the education world. Well, e-learning was never considered. And then over a weekend, 6 million students with difficulties, of course, had to find a solution to that. That's a sign of a country that is present, that exists. Whereas we focus on the rule of 100, we decide to pay money to the pensioners that are not the future of our country, of course. We have to focus on young people, buying tablets for them. So our challenge to recover productivity and solidarity is something we have to rise up to. Well, Roberto talked about a new initiative in Italy, in Europe, the Digital Service Act, which is an attempt to give back a role to Europe, so a factory of European technologies. CERN was born there, the basis of the World Wide Web. This is the internet we want. This is the internet we have to promote. So we have to rediscover all this, and this is very useful because it reminds us of the fact that viruses like the one we are addressing now are a social disease. No one can be saved on their own, so we need a coordination model. So it's a halfway between a pre-internet world where computers were isolated and a world where every hub is part of a network. So rediscovering this principle means recovering productivity, and I will conclude by saying that a big shock was not on globalization. It's not the global division or breakdown of work that has changed, so that we're going to stop importing from China. That's crazy. But it's the local organization of work that has changed, because we have discovered that the many meetings we used to have can be held on the internet, that a document can be shared on Google Docs, and this is slowly changing, of course, because it's difficult to overcome some resilience from the managers, from the unionists that used to say this can't be done. So there are constraints of some blind people, not everyone, of course, that have been changing the rules of productivity. We will need time because infrastructure is needed, but we will abide by this, because without this, Europe will not restart, nor will global growth, because what is based on public death is morphine, is compensation, is a drug. We shouldn't be prophets singing in the middle of nowhere. We should have the necessary authority to say this is the starting point from which to start rebuilding a country, a project like that of Europe, and making sure that Europe can go back being a factory of digital technology. It did it with GDPR, with other initiatives. It is doing this with the Digital Service Act. So Europe has always set the rules for the whole world. In America, someone has forgot about this and has decided to turn a blind eye on this to create other realities. But GSM was invented here. The GDPR rules were invented here. While in China, there's someone exploiting an imperial political approach to win some space. And since there's still lots of space to be conquered on the internet, we cannot lose this scenario. Europe as a single market, as a single organization, is hoping to become a guardian of rules, and the strongest one always wins in the jungle, and this is what's been happening over the past few months. The big monopolies, the big global oligopolies of the internet have been winning of the past. In part, you have anticipated the next question I'm willing to ask you, but I have to share a secret with you. I bought a tablet for my mother-in-law. You were great. Now be responsible for your crazy actions. But I also paid for a subscription fee, so I have two problems now. Well, it's the most cost-effective in Europe. Maybe our bandwidth is not that big, but we have the lowest fees in Europe. Well, she was very happy in using it for the first few days to connect with her grandchildren. Then she has set it aside because she hasn't understood yet that there can be also some interesting contents there to focus on and to read.
Let's come to the last point that you've already mentioned, that you called a founding moment for the digital market, to make sure that the conditions are created for a sustainable development and for the birth of new players who should not be the great US players. So do you want to add something on the foundation of the European Digital Institution? Well, that's the new Europe cannot come into being with financial instruments only. Well, I'm happy with the recovery fund and so on, and this is something totally new, and the virus made them possible. So we are at the Hamilton moment. 200 years ago, the United States created the their federal structure, but we need a true European antitrust model, and the Digital Service Act goes in that direction, namely that Europe is not up for grabs by the oligopolistic powers. And the coronavirus helped them out quite a lot in this. Microsoft, Skype, Dreams, they have, and Amazon as well, they've trebled their business in Italy, and they can even provide loans to companies. They can do anything. Facebook is launching a payment on WhatsApp. Google and Apple, as Roberto was saying, they decide what medical information should be provided on the coronavirus. But in actual fact, they have taken on the power that should lie with the health authorities. So these companies have done great work and they have invested, but this is not enough. Europe has to take up its, regain its lost ground, and the European Digital Institution is a platform for services for companies and citizens who want to interact not with the national individual bodies, but with Europe. The day before yesterday, Europe adopted the interoperability guidelines for technologies that fight against coronavirus. And I'm on the Italian task force that contributed to this network. So I'm happy that I helped make this step forward towards the creation of a federal health service. So the European Digital Institution is extremely important, and we need a new constitutional pact that should not be written in 20 languages, but in the single language of smart contracts. We invented the language of, in this area, we invented the GSM, the first world standard for interoperability. So why can't we invent and impose in a liberal and open way through, like the open system of internet? So why can't we contribute to this new situation? So the democratic and liberal, inclusive and solidarity-based approach becomes a code, it becomes an algorithm. AI is not only replacing human work, which is important, but it is the creation of rules. We must go back to Kant and to a Europe that can create universal laws based on experience, respect for individuals, consumers, and so on. This is Europe's mission. Internet and digital is not only an expenditure, but the flag of Europe for those who believe in freedom and in inclusion. Well, thank you. As usual, you're always very smart and brilliant. You're a sort of a tsunami, and I'm sure that many people are going to read your article. So I'll see you on Twitter, and hopefully I'll see you in person quite soon. At this point, I think that we can look at the answers on the first questions on recovery. So what prevails is pessimism, but it is not as evident as I had expected. 43% say that things won't go back to normal before the first quarter of 2021. There are and those who think that we're going to go back to normal by the end of 2020 is quite high as well. So there is optimism, but as Renato Brunetti was saying, this is linked to the audience that we have today, which is an audience made up of companies that have not been heavily affected by the crisis. But at this point, I would like to launch a second number of questions. A second survey. So, what do you think about the Immuni application? And here we have the answers were very, very fast. And actually, over 40% have already installed it. and 40% consider it to be useless. This is a very interesting screenshot of reality, but we're going to hear about this at the end of the morning with the last panel. At this point, we're going to have some ads, some advertisements, and after which we will start with the next session.
Molto di Namex è la semplicità con cui fanno le cose, è una cosa che mi piace molto, è gente seria che fa bene con semplicità il lavoro e fa quello che serve, e quindi io sono molto contento che esista e gli auguro il meglio.
It's movement that pushes us forward, driving us to a better destination. And it's rarely achieved alone. At Extreme, we believe the progress is sparked by connecting our customers, not just to the internet, but to the world, to each other, effortlessly. Because we believe that when we connect, we learn, we create, and we grow together. We also know that progress is about leadership and innovation, about being on the cutting edge, whether it's inventing the first gigabit Ethernet switch or delivering the first and only cloud-driven end-to-end enterprise networking solution. It's being one step ahead and always looking forward, advancing, unafraid to try something never done before. We won't rest until we make every network experience truly effortless. That's why we push the boundaries of technology, leveraging the powers of machine learning, artificial intelligence, analytics, and automation. Progress is driven by people, our people, who deliver continuous innovation at cloud speed. Because we know that's how our customers need us to be. We see a world where enterprise networking is autonomous and effortless, advancing the way we connect, work, and live like never before. Progress is action. It's movement. And we want to take you on that journey forward.
Bentornati, passiamo al primo panel
Welcome back. The first panel today involves some of the most important IXPs in the world. That is points of observation to see what happens in the network, to check and monitor what happens in the network. So we're going to be linked up with Beijing, the Executive Vice President of Chayora Limited, Mr. Liu, and was Vice President in the past of China Cash. And then New York, Akio Sugeno, Vice President of Telehouse America, amongst the founders of the IXP of New York. And in Rome, we have Maurizio Goretti, CEO of Namex, and I invite him to come and join us here at the table.
Benvenuto Maurizio.
Grazie Cristoforo.
Welcome Maurizio. Well, I'm told that you have a surprise for us, a video that I haven't seen yet. Well, I lost a bet with a friend of mine, and this is the video about that bet. Good morning to my Italian friends and also to my international friends. Maurizio Goretti challenged me. He asked me to speak in Italian. And since I stopped working for Lynx at the end of last year, I started learning Italian. And I went to lessons every week, and I have also done exercises every day virtually, and these are the results. So, as Maurizio can tell you better than I can, during the last few months I have also worked with as a consultant for him. So thank you for having listened to my very first speech in Italian before an audience. So happy 25th anniversary. I wish you all the best. I wish all the best to you in Namex for the future. Well,
welcome Yali in Beijing and welcome Akio in New York City, from east to west following the pandemic. So welcome Yali, welcome Akio. The first question, Yali, about the pandemic situation. Could you give us an update about the pandemic in China?
Thank you very much for having me here. Well, with regard to the COVID-19 pandemic, probably we have seen that, put aside the initial confusion, in China, basically the government did everything possible to clamp down the virus from spreading. And they put in very strict policy and procedures, have travel restrictions and social distancing, etc. So it seems like all worked well until about a week ago. There were only a few isolated cases. It was pretty much all back to normal. The schools start to reopen and the business back to we're all back to work, basically. However, just in the last week, there's a new case, there's a new outbreak. Initially, about a dozen people, and it's in Beijing. Seems like all linked to a wet market. But with the internet and big data analysis, they were able to track down all the people that's in close contact with those confirmed cases. And now China across the country have about 300 confirmed cases. That's after they have done tens of thousands of testing in the past week. So that's the current situation, but that's pretty much under control. And the rest of the country is, basically business as usual.
Thank you, Yali. And Akio, USA has been involved more recently, but with the highest number of cases. What is the situation now in the US and in particular in New York City? Akio? Akio, could you connect the microphone?
Unmute.
Please switch on you have to switch.
Okay, I'm sorry. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like congratulations on the 25th anniversary. And this is a great achievement. And I'd like to thank Namex for giving me opportunity to share this moment. And it's my honor to be here today. To answer your questions, most workers in the United States still working from home, including our companies. And since each state can have its own rules and policies, meaning there's no nationwide policies and regulations, some states such as Texas started to open and lift restrictions. And number of new cases in the death tolls is decreasing. However, it is difficult to say it's under control yet. And as in any countries, there is also battle between health and the economy. So some people are strongly against the restriction and lockdown. However, most people are understand the situation and is so cooperative. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Akio. Last but not least, of course, Maurizio, what is the situation in Italy? For the Italian, it's well known, but a summary could be useful.
Yes, we have been in post-lockdown phases for 1 month now, and finger crossed. It seems that everything is going well. Our government looked carefully to the numbers, and so far so good. So I hope that will still continue like that.
Second question is about the presentation of the Internet exchange point and the COVID-19 impact. China, US, and Italy, of course, are very different model and very country-specific. So, but I want to ask to everyone, first of all, to present the Internet exchange point in terms of membership, of business model, and on traffic, and then to evaluate the impact of the COVID-19 on the traffic pattern during this period. So, Yali, could you maybe describe in particular the Internet framework in China and the role of the Internet exchange point in China? Yali?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I have a slide. I don't know if you could show that, if possible. So basically, as we all know probably that China is by far the largest internet market in the world. And there are over 900 million internet users in China. And what's interesting is that more than 85% of the mobile internet users are actually using using the mobile payment. With the COVID-19 situation, actually, as mentioned in the past week, there's a new outbreak, and because everybody have to have a app on their mobile phone that shows where they're about, and then people use mobile payment, do all the transactions in the market, no cash exchange. And so they were able to track down all the people who has been in the market and be able to quickly identify those people. And besides that, just on day-to-day, for the general population, everyone have to have this app in their mobile. You have to carry it around basically when you go out, because there's a code, like a QR code that shows your health. It's called a health code. And you have to show that in order to get into a building or get in to wherever you want to be. So it's widely being used. That's the situation. And then during the so another perspective, maybe we move on to next page. Okay, so for the internet itself in China, there are 3 major service providers in China, and they don't really connect well. So just to give you some background information, that those are the 3 major carriers, and they have a different network, and then they connect at what we call the NAP. And then, but that it has its own challenges. And then from an international perspective, there are international gateway. So the outside world is not directly, the outside of China and the in mainland China sort of separated by the, what do we call, you probably heard of the Great Firewall. So some of the application that works really well in the rest of the world, like Google, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. So all of those doesn't work in China, in mainland China. So, but instead, China has alternatives like WeChat and Alipay and everything else. So it's just a different world that compare with the outside of China. So that's the challenge we're facing. And then from an internet exchange perspective, it's at a very early stage. There are 2 internet exchange listed on the, if you look at the peering DB, you will find 2 listed. And this first one is what this is my initiative. Basically, this is called the CHNIX Chinix. And this is when I was with China Cash, and we worked with M6 through collaboration with M6. We built this first internet exchange in China. That was 5 years ago. That's in 2015. And then also we got great support from APIX, also EuroIX. The community really give us great support, and also other exchange like Namex and DKIX, etc. They all have been very supportive on the internet exchange development in China. But besides Chinix, then the next one is the CNIX. Actually, that one also is in Beijing. So Chinix is in Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, but most of the traffic is in Beijing. And then CNIX is also in Beijing. And the traffic you can see here, that's for Chinix. There are certain growth. And the members included basically all the major content providers and cloud providers. And remember, these are all mainland content providers and cloud providers. And those international or global cloud providers that they do business in China, some of them are connected as well. But the current situation in China is that there's no clear regulation for internet exchange. So it's a delicate situation. So even some company are connected, they don't want to be shown or publicly shown as they are because the regulation is not clear. So that's basically is the current situation. But in terms of the traffic, Chinix have 300 some gig of traffic, and CNIX have more. It's more than 500 gig of traffic. But totally add up, it's less than 1 T of traffic at this time, but we see great potential for growth.
Very interesting. Of course, you are in an early stage, and the regulatory framework will be an interesting point, a very important point for the future. Akio, your business model is probably very different, of course, but could you present the New York Internet Exchange Point and the service offering in New York? Akio?
Of course, thank you, Rich. Could you put my slide, please?
Yes. The slide, prego.
Okay, Namex was established in New York in 1996. That means we will celebrate our 25th anniversary next year. So currently, our system is based on the extremes, the SLX routers, and based on the MPLS, VPLS architectures. We have 2 cores, 2 route servers, and 6 edges, and serving 7 remote locations, covering New York and New Jersey. We support both IPv4 and IPv6. Could you go to next slide, please?
Next slide, please.
Okay. As of June 10th, we have 214 members, and the peak traffic is currently 700 gig or over, roughly 760, 770. And the number of members who use route server is 163. And the IPv4 routes, we have over 100,000 routes on the route servers. And for IPv6, we have 30,000 route servers. And we have our members includes the coming from not only US, but Canada, Europe, Asia, and the South America, such as Brazil. And our members includes like, of course, contents, eyeballs, and CDN, and SNS, and recently we're getting a lot of the online gaming companies. So after pandemic, we have received the lots of the orders from the current members, and we also are having a lot of the new members. And since early January this year, we have increased over by like 100 gig for in 6 months alone. And so that's the current situation. And the regarding business model, in some countries, IXP or exchange points are considered as a public infrastructure, and they should be operated as a nonprofit organization. However, in the United States, mainly exchange points are for profit. And also, to be careful about under the current situations. Currently, our engineers are working from the remote, so I'm trying to minimize the technician dispatch to other data centers, because in reality, employees of many data centers are tested positive for COVID-19, so we want to be careful. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Akio. Maurizio, now, we know that Namex is a no-profit consortium. What have been the main traffic pattern change during the lockdown period in Italy?
Yes, we are a member-based not-for-profit consortium, a more European model than the other two. I have 3 slides that try to show what happened during the lockdown period. The first one says, you can see that from one day to another, the traffic increase of 50%. And it remains stable for all the phase 1 period. And then they start to decrease just after we have the reopening of we start to reopen step by step. It was a really big challenge, but everything worked enough well, let me say. The second thing that I like to show is the shape of the traffic during the day. We usually have, before the COVID-19, a peak of traffic just after dinner at 10 p.m. usually. But during the COVID-19 period, we had the traffic increase and stay stable more or less for the whole day. This is still true, also in this phase 2. And the third thing that I'd like to show you is the change of the direction of the traffic. We have graphs from our national research network that connect all the universities and the research centers in Italy. You can see that they became from let me use this word, access provider. They get to be a content provider, because the people that was inside the university move at home and start to get content. That means the lesson from the university. So this is very interesting, I think.
Okay, thank you, Maurizio. The last question is about the lesson learned, and we have 2 questions. The first one is about the measure you have taken in order to increase the resilience of the network and to reduce the bottleneck during the pandemic. And the second one is looking to the future, and I will ask you to better understand the feedback that this experience could have on the developing of new service and the next generation services. So starting with Yali, what will be the most important internet exchange service that could be interesting for the internet provider in China? What will be the most important services in order to develop the internet exchange point in China? Yali.
Yeah. Well, since the internet exchange in China is still in the early stage, and out of the total traffic, very small percentage is actually going through the internet exchange. So we didn't see a huge jump in terms of a traffic increase. However, I think people definitely realize that with all the online education and working from home and all these applications, there's a need for better connectivity. And then in China, specifically, the government is really focused on what they call the basic infrastructure development. They see that internet and data centers are part of the basic infrastructure. And driving with 5G and IoT and AI development, there are just tremendous needs for better connectivity. So there are great opportunity for IXP development in China. That's one perspective. And the other is that, as I showed earlier, so China basically consists of three major incumbent carriers. They take basically vast majority of the network. So the government also put in a mandate to ask the three incumbent carriers to have peering between them, of segment-free peering. So that's also encouraging. But we're looking forward to see how would that get implemented. It's going to be an interesting effort. And then also for IXP development, the government put in a pilot program, or looking to put in pilot program. And they want the three incumbent carriers to participate in the pilot program. So that's also interesting. And that's outside of the existing a few IXP that's already operational. So that's the current stats. Yeah.
Thank you, Yali. Coming for Akio, the same question. Could you present your new service roadmap for the next year? What will be the new service and the next generation service that you will provide to your customer in US?
Thank you. Yeah. So currently we are working on three areas. First one is connectivity for remote peering. We are working with some connectivity providers, to facilitate remote peering. One of the main markets is South America, such as Brazil. So also we are working with the domestic providers. We just prepared a 100 gig port to be shared. And so customers of this provider can easily connect to our exchange point simply via portal. Also with our affiliate, JPIX. JPIX is now connected to our Los Angeles exchange point, so that the JPIX customer can peer with our Los Angeles customers. And number two, this is regarding route server. We're trying to implement our PKI for our route servers. If any ISP in this audience wants to work with us, that's pretty welcome. Number three, IX API. As you know, IX API specification has been published. So we are investigating how we can incorporate to our service and operations in the future. Yeah, thank you, Ray. That's my...
Thank you, Akio. Maurizio, probably Italy is a best practice about the measure you have taken during the pandemic. So the first comment is about the measure you have taken, and secondly, what about the new services?
We try to do our best during the pandemic. We try to face the problem that comes, as you can imagine, when you have more than 50% in just one day. But I think that the main things that we like to say, we like to talk about, is the collaboration between members, between the internet service provider. We are member-based consortium, and this works during the lockdown, during the pandemic, because the internet service provider collaborated one to each other. I'd like to give you an example. There were There was an internet service provider that worked mainly with the hotel and with the conference. So you can imagine that during the lockdown, they were completely, without any traffic. And they give for free their traffic to small providers that has lots for them, all is relative, access end users. They have some problem because they saturate their internet traffic, and they have to wait too much to upgrade with the usual procedures. So they give them for free using our equipment. That was good. Another things that I like to mention is the collaboration between the other internet exchange points with Topics, Mix, and V6. We were able all together to collaborate with our incumbent team that get back on the peering platform, and because they also like with us to face the problem that the people has during the lockdown and the big amount of traffic that we have during this period, they accept to come back in the public peering and re-peering again after too many years, let me say.
That's why probably you are a best practice.
Yeah.
In Europe at least.
And just another thing, we already have been working with the automation of our networks. I think that the lockdown show us that is the right way to do, and we still continue to work on that. In particular, we have these new services, that is marketplace, that allow to the internet service provider to turn on their service on demand. And we are working on that. We are in the first stage, and we hope to conclude this. It's already a service in our catalog, but we hope that to finish the whole procedure until the end of next year.
Thank you. We probably have a couple of questions for Yali and Akio. Is it true? Okay, the first one is for Yari. Regarding the position of the two internet exchange points in China, is it a centralized model working considering the huge traffic distribution in China or not? Is it a centralized model or not?
Right, yeah. So basically, due to the restrictions in the local market, or the way we have been working through this is a centralized model. So even a content provider in another province very far from Beijing, they would take the traffic all the way to Beijing to connect. And that still works. Yeah, so we have ISPs across the country that come in. So it's a centralized model for both IXP at this time. Yeah.
Everyone wants to speak with Yali, so I mean, we have another question for you. The second one? No, okay, sorry, the second question is for Akio. So Akio is for you, the second one. How many points of presence did you have? And about peering policy, how many are open versus selective? And the last point, and probably most interesting for Italy, is about your marketplace. Could you give us some more information about the marketplace and how does it work? Akio.
Okay, regarding the point of presence, we have 6 points of presence and serving 7 locations. And what is the next question?
Yes, the other question yes, was about the marketplace, because we are working on a marketplace in Italy, but your marketplace, it's a very interesting marketplace. So how does it work in New York, the marketplace services you provide to the customers?
Yeah, so we're still working on it, but we have about 20 resellers. So actually, they are working for us to expand our service to their own marketplace, like Europe, Asian, or South American countries.
Yep. Thank you to everyone, and see you soon and possibly live in Rome. Thank you, Yali, and thank you, Akio.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ci rivediamo a questo punto tra qualche minuto dopo la pubblicità. Grazie.
Hello, Namex. Congratulations on your 25th anniversary. 25 years, a quarter of a century, seems a long time. But in the rapid growth of the internet these 25 years, a time flies like an arrow. I believe that Namex played a very important role in the rise of internet in Italy. I learned at the school that Rome has a long history, 2,500 years or more. Therefore, these 25 years of Namex is the first step of your coming long history, like Rome itself.
In the cloud. It's live streaming the highest profile events to the largest global audiences and blocking the largest cyber attacks companies have ever seen. It's powering amazing digital experiences.
We connect companies in Europe, North America and Asia. We have 30,000 kilometers of fiber optic network. We are Avalon Campus, the largest Italian private hub for neutral colocation.
Networks and redefining the possibilities of a connected world.
Passiamo a questo punto dalle reti ai servizi.
Now from services and networks over a weekend to something that seemed impossible but became a reality. So we're going to talk about smart working and e-learning that involved thousands of people in Italy. But before talking with our keynote speakers, I wanted to show you a contribution to show you what our young people have managed to do during this period.
How can I resist you? Mamma mia, does it show again? My, just how much I miss you. Yes, I've been broken hearted, blue since the day we parted. Why did I ever let you go? Mamma mia, now I really know. My, I could never let you go.
We have the honor of having with us the Vice Minister Anna Ascani, who is very busy with the end of the school year. So welcome, Madam Vice Minister. Well, thank you for having invited me. A first question. In our thinking as parents, I'm the father of two teenagers, I tend to think about the school as something that is archaic and with elderly teachers, with instruments and so on that are very much outdated, and with a lack of computerization. So my first question is this: how was it possible to organize over such a short time an activity which seems to have worked? What were the problems that you had to deal with, and how did you solve those problems, especially at the beginning? Well, all this was possible by utilizing the human resources that are the true capital that makes the difference in the school setting, therefore the goodwill, their interest and their hard work. Our Italian professors and teachers started using platforms that they had never used, and also the families and students contributed by helping their children to use these instruments, especially during the period of the total lockdown. We called this the didactics of neighborhood, let's say, because this enabled the teachers to be close to their students and to continue their teaching. Obviously, there were some shortcomings and critical points. We did make available resources so as to enable the disadvantaged students who did not have devices or connectivity to be equipped. But there is a digital divide in our country. There is a gap between different areas in terms of connectivity, and this did have its toll. So we asked the broadband unit to make it available to as many families as possible, and some money has been investments are being made to provide this infrastructure in order to solve the historic problems of our schools. The skills that our teachers learned and that the students learned as well is something that is positive for the future. It's something that they will be able to bank on. Well, it seems to me that the schools did not act all together, but each went their own way. So is it possible to envisage that there might be a single platform for education in the country according to rules and so on established by the ministry? Well, we decided not to intervene because this would have actually slowed down the initiatives. This is an experience that managed to involve almost all Italian students, and therefore intervening with strict rules by having to use a single platform would have slowed the process down. But for the future, yes, we will be coming up with some guidelines. There will be a greater structuring in terms of interaction and bargaining with the forces, with the teachers and so on, because distance learning is something that is totally unregulated. So now we're going to have to work on this as well and provide a body of rules that will be applied across the country. With regard to the platform, well, we need to examine the pros and cons of this type of initiative. But for the time being, the work that has been done so far was actually the only possible thing that could have been done in those conditions. So if there were to be a new lockdown of the same size and proportions, then it will be important to have a single platform so that everyone can use them. Obviously, we do have to comply with the privacy rules, and also the providers have to commit to these conditions. And I must say that all those the providers who did provide the platforms undersigned this agreement on the privacy of the data. Well, thank you. I think that this is a position which is upheld by most people listening to us, and that is the possibility of giving people the freedom of choice in a context that will be as competitive as possible. It is early now, but I'm sure that you've already made an evaluation of how things have gone to understand what did work and what did not, and what were the numbers involved in terms of number of teaching hours that were delivered online. So what is your evaluation, both in terms of quality and numbers? Well, we monitored the schools. We asked all the school directors to provide us with information, and there are also other players that gather data that we have involved. So a large number of students were reached by and were involved in distance learning, and the instruments that were used, however, vary widely. They're very different from each other. In the earlier weeks, some would only fill in the electronic logbook. Others who had already developed with the plan, the e-school plan that had been issued in 2015. Some schools were ready to go ahead with e-learning, and so they took specific initiatives right from the beginning of the lockdown. However, we asked all of our teachers and the directors to make an assessment of what has been done in order to see what gaps need to be filled before September, when students will have to go back to school, and to help also those students who didn't pass their exams, and therefore we hope that we can activate and initiate a number of activities to fill in the gaps. Special attention needs to be paid to people with disabilities, students with disabilities, and who did not have access to the e-learning techniques. And so we need to intervene with or plan some type of intervention to for the inclusion of these less advantaged students. Well, thank you. A school in Codogno issued a tweet that thanked their teachers, and the students spoke about their enthusiasm for freedom, but also the fear of having to manage their free time on their own. However, the general evaluation for these students was positive. I teenage children, and I spied a bit on them, but actually they did make very good use of their time. And now another question. With regard to school in September, some assumptions have been made, and the possibility of continuing distance learning. I'm sure that you have many problems to deal with because you've got the teachers to reorganize and so on. But what can we expect with regard to the use of distance learning with the reopening of the schools in September? Well, we have acknowledged that the families and students have worked wonders, but we do want them back in school in September. Not because we want to overlook the importance of the digital tools, but because school is much more than just distance learning, because there is sharing of spaces, there is closeness, there is interaction, So we do want our students to go back to school because the school is the right setting for them. What distance learning leaves us with is the skills of our teachers and of the students and the possibility of carrying out a number of activities that can be carried out through via the internet, like making up for shortcomings for students who are lagging behind and need some extra tutoring, and so on. So there is a possibility of using these skills in a number of ways. Obviously, an effort needs to be made, and we've discussed this quite at length. Distance learning has not replaced the school. There are some experiences that were very, very positive, but then there are areas in the country or in even around some of the cities, this wasn't much of a success because of the lack of connections, of internet connections, and so on. So it is important to provide the opportunity for giving our students the best. So we need to recover the system of equality. We want to be able to give to our students the same opportunities, and we need to make up for those who were not able to have access to any form of education because of the lack of internet connections. So we're taking care of that as well, and as I was saying, we do believe that having the children come back and students come back to school is what we're aiming for. Thank you for the time you have given us, and we wish you all the best in the work you're doing. Thank you. And now let's move on to the second intervention that we have here, the second experience we have had, or experimentation. We're going to talk to Professor Mariano Corso from Milan, from IP. He is a leading expert in smart working. He has been dealing with smart working for more than 10 years now, looking at the way the public administration, private companies, and so on behave with regard to smart working. Well, thank you for inviting me. I am very pleased to be with you. Let's begin with the definition, since you've been working on smart working for 10 years. So what do we mean? Or what was the meaning of smart working up until recently? What was smart working like up until the pandemic? Well, this was a good beginning because often there's lots of confusion with regard to smart working, with the way it was conceived 10 years ago and what it has become, and how it was perceived also from a regulatory point of view. And this goes well beyond what might be meant by working from home. Well, smart working is an organizational model which gives the individual the possibility of choosing where to carry out one's job, the timing, the accountability. So a smart worker has an agreement, free and reversible agreement, and he can decide to be more autonomous and be more accountable or responsible. So it doesn't matter where you are when you're working or at what time you're working. What is important is the result you obtain. So smart working is something that can be done in the office, and it can be done at home. So in Italy, we have a very modern body of rules on this. Act 81 of 2017 that interpreted this phenomenon that was underway in various companies. So here, smart working is considered to be a free and reversible agreement between the company and the worker, according to which one can forego the place of work and the working hours and work on the basis of objectives to be achieved. So it is a very modern law. However, we can speak about pre-coronavirus and post-coronavirus. During last year, smart working had risen by 20% over the previous year. 600,000 people were working in this type of, according to this type of arrangement, whereas they were 570,000 in October, with a 20% increase. So we might say 600,000 in February, mainly in the larger companies. This was not so widespread in the smaller companies and in the public administration, in the public bodies. Now, this is the situation as it was before the pandemic, and there were a number of obstacles, not technological or regulatory obstacles, but actually they were cultural and organizational barriers, because in order to work by objective, you need to have instruments to measure those objectives, the accomplishment of the objectives, and to focus on merit, therefore the right planning, right checking the results and giving feedback. These are self-evident elements. This is something that a good manager must do, but often in our traditional world, these are skills that are not there. Well, you define this, you mentioned this recent law, which you said is very modern and is in the vanguard, but it can be a good platform for the future. But you have also spoken about the evaluation of the quantum leap that was made, this improvement in quality with regard to what happened during the pandemic, where we went from hundreds of thousands of people to millions of people involved. So can you tell us something about this?
Well, there's no certain data, but there's the data that we have been collecting right now, and as we know, it was a big tsunami. Starting from the very beginning of the emergency, smart working has been identified as the preferable, in some cases unique, instrument to go on with business activities. Now we have estimated that the number of workers that are coming to terms with a new way of working is 6 to 8 million. So the most reasonable estimate is 7 million right now. Well, obviously, what people are doing is not the textbook smart working, which we had followed and accompanied in many businesses. There are some organizations, there are some companies that technologically were prepared already, and also from a management standpoint, and have proven to be very resilient. They've also increased their performance and their productivity, and others have improvised. And what a good portion of these 7 million workers have done is not true smart working, really, given also a number of elements that have been forced upon them to allow the country to move on and to respond to this emergency. For example, the voluntary nature, because smart working is an agreement at least it was born like this, as a free and reversible agreement. While this voluntary component, this possibility to choose, was not made available, because when one person chooses smart working, they should be put in a position of choosing where to work from. And smart working implies an organizational change that cannot be done overnight. So smart working was a very powerful instrument to allow the country to at least reconcile social distancing with business continuity. So I can't even think of what might have happened to our country if we didn't have the option to do some smart working from our homes. So technology and also a certain organizational model have minimized damage. So think about the effect of such a thing only 10 years ago. The damage would have been huge and impossible to calculate, really. So you were asking about how things went, really. If we've learned something from this experience. Well, there's some preliminary evidence I've brought to you here. Mariano, excuse me. Tell us what slide you're talking about. Yes. For example, slide number 5. That's the one. So in this pie chart, that was the right one. That was the right slide. Thank you. So here you can see the big resilience effect. So the overwhelming majority of our workers that were working in a smart environment have managed to do everything they needed to do. And sometimes, well, they even performed better than usual. The sample is 8,000 workers here, public and private workers, and 70% of them have recorded this result. And this, of course, has helped us overcome prejudice. We have realized it can be done, and the workers were really satisfied with this new solution. They have felt more independent. They have experienced more autonomy and also the will to make it. There have been some difficulties, of course, some challenges due to this improvisation. Next slide, please, is slide number 6. We asked them what actually worked and what were the main challenges that they had faced, and the sample is pretty sizable here too. Of course, the external elements that have forced smart working upon us because of the need of social distancing have caused some stress, a sense of isolation. What really worked, and if you could put the slide back on, what really worked, surprisingly so, was technology. Even if everything was improvised, everyone was improvising. We were heaping about what happened with e-learning, but all the workers, well, think about these 7,000 workers that have happened to start working overnight, and this is just employees that are also freelancers and self-employed workers. Well, technology worked. It kept up with what they needed. Well, of course, the degree of preparation might have been higher, but people have learned to use new technology. They have attended a full immersion course of digital skills. So we are commenting on a big catastrophe, but might seem weird to you to praise some of these new developments. But let's say that the digitization ability for our country has been heavily impacted, and this shock is leaving us with some valuable legacy. And this is what most workers are actually claiming, that despite all the difficulties, all the challenges, the overwhelming majority of the workers that have had to come to terms with the lack of adequate tools to work in a remote environment have said that they have learned a lot and they would like to make the most of this learning. Look at this data. The sample is still 8,000 workers. The average assessment, the average evaluation of this experience in a scale 1 to 10 is between 8 and 9. So it was unanimously positive for everyone. So people believed that this experience is something they can learn from and they shouldn't go back from this. Very interesting. So we have carried out a survey ourselves, a small survey. So we asked 100 companies that have participated in the event, what was their idea, what was their assessment of the smart working experience. More than 85% have talked about the great involvement of their workers and other data that are pretty much in line with what you have shown. So in 75% of the cases, the experience was considered to be positive or very positive in terms of impact on productivity. And in two-thirds of the workers, for two-thirds of the workers, the evaluation of the individual workers has been very positive. So what you are saying is true. There's the will to go on, at least in part, with this experience. Yes, definitely. Of course, there are also people willing to go back. And there are some people willing to go back because this would mean, well, keeping on with this experience would mean to eradicate a whole system. Well, if the emergency ended here and if we could go back to the business as usual scenario as of tomorrow, as if nothing happened, well, many of our workers would be frustrated, even if many businesses have measured the effects. There have been an increase in productivity. We have a small advantage from this standpoint. So phase 2 is a potential big laboratory. So we should coexist with the virus over the next few months. And that's pretty clear. So we are forced to do things in a different way. We have left our comfort zone. And so also today is an example of what I mean. So the fact that we have to be more aware of what is ahead of us and go on with this experimentation is a treasure. It's a value that we have to cherish for our country, for our businesses, for our full employability. So I think that in this phase 2, we will be able to start a number of tests and to carry out a number of pilot projects so that we will be able to choose and truly choose. We'll be way more mature and we will be able to do that with technological instruments that will help us have a new beginning rather than a restart. Well, something you said that is not so obvious, well, I wrote it down. Smart working is a free and reversible agreement. So let's move on with this experiment and always bear in mind this golden rule. Thank you very much, Mariano. Thank you. Thank you for the kind invitation. Well, at this point, we've got the results of the survey on the Immuni app. What do you think of the Immuni application? Well, some mild optimism. But even if we are in a hyper-technological environment, because most of the people that are connected today are engineers, IT specialists, economists, that work in the engineering field, the fact that only 1/3 of the participants are skeptical, well, it's something that we'll have to consider during our debate after the break. But this break will open, like every year, with a traditional invitation to support the Peter Pan organization that deals with children affected by oncological diseases and is supporting the families of these children. So a short break and then we will resume our session. Thank you.
È difficile spiegare che cos'è il cancro per un bambino come Luca. Potremmo dirvi che è una prova di coraggio, una battaglia da vincere, o un cattivo che si può combattere usando speciali superpoteri. Ma per Luca oggi il cancro è molto di più. È il volto sconfitto di suo padre, che sta per perdere a nascondino. Con il tuo 5 per 1000 a Peter Pan, il cancro può essere anche questo. Una vita normale, in una casa dove i bambini come Luca possono continuare a essere bambini. Peter Pan, parte della cura.
Mobile access. Sonic Wall SMA consolidates your access control infrastructure, securing access for authenticated users using any authorized device to any application.
We connect companies in Europe, North America and Asia. We have 30,000 kilometers of fiber optic network. We are Avalon Campus, the largest Italian private hub for neutral collocation.
We're creating a whole new vision for tomorrow's networks and redefining the possibilities of a connected world.
Bentornati, prima di cominciare.
Welcome back. Before resuming, just some housekeeping announcements. Well, in preparation of this afternoon's workshops, please log on to the website meeting.namex.it so you can find information. Second household announcement is more than 500 people that have been connected since this morning. I didn't think you would have been able to resist that long, but please Stay tuned also in the last part of this morning. Now we are starting with our last session. We're going to show a video that should kindle some optimism.
Tengo a precisare che non ho scelto io i
I would like to clarify that I haven't chosen the singers, I only chose the song. So in the last act of this morning's play, we thought about focusing on a multidisciplinary approach. We invited three different people with different backgrounds, an engineer, sociologist, an IT specialist, and an economist that will help us understand why things are not going to be as they were before. I would like to welcome Maurizio Decina, who should be with us from Milan. I would like to welcome Stefano Epifani from Rome, Stefano Quintarelli from Milan as well, or anyway from northern Italy, and Antonio Nicita from Rome. Are you all connected, I hope? I see you. I see your faces with different backgrounds, really. Different backdrops. Well, thank you all. So let's start with Maurizio Decina. For me in particular, but for many of us, is always the person to go to understand where networks are headed. Thank you. Thank you all. I'm honored to participate in this panel. Maurizio. Well, the impression is that the network has kept up with the stress test pretty good. So I would like to ask you if that's the case and if this is part of the nature of the internet or part of the architecture, if there have been some bottlenecks from your point of view. Well, I will start with slide number 1, please. Could you please put on slide number 1? This slide is very simple. This slide shows the increase in peak traffic measured by Akamai in the different points of the network where it is present. So the difference is between, well, the benchmark is March 2019. You can see that the peak traffic has doubled from 82 Tbps to 167 Tbps. So usually the internet traffic increases by 25% every year. So at least there's an extra traffic of 75%. Slide number 2, please. Slide 2. It's a very interesting slide because it shows, first of all, the 2 key months, February, March 2020 versus February, March 2019. So it shows traffic change in terms of percentage and speed change as well. I'm referring to download speed. As you can see, Italy shows a huge increase in traffic by 100%, but there's also a strong reduction in peak. It's very different from other countries. They have been increased by 40, 50 or 60%. And this is bear witness to what? Slide 3, please. Slide 3 to answer this question. Thank you. That's a pretty slide because it shows over time how traffic has changed, reaching this 100% increase, and the download speed that has gone down to 30% when the infection was growing in Italy. So what do I mean by this? What do these lights mean? Well, what do these data suggest? Well, in Italy, there has been an increase by 100% of internet traffic, but the consumers spend on the internet has increased by 90%. Italy is very different from other countries. It is lagging behind in terms of digital skills, in terms of education. This is something very important that shows. So the pandemic has forced people to learn to use the net way more than other countries have done, where there's less IT illiteracy, so to speak. So there's potential in our country to help the internet culture grow. Why has the internet kept up? Well, if the pandemic took place 20 years ago or 10 years ago, it would have been crazy. 100% increase in telephony would have required big investments, a big change. Whereas the internet has an unforeseeable traffic, even if 80% is video, everything is streaming, but it is planned with great flexibility with respect to the past. There are big routers today, there are big boards checking on the load on the links. If it is pretty heavy, well, the link is doubled. So it is a mechanism that is standard, just how the internet does routing. Then this helped the network to keep up. There have been some bottlenecks. Of course, the download speed has gone down, and Netflix has reduced the quality of its video. So there has been some adaptation to the traffic increase in terms of content delivery. For example, I was told about problems that people had in their homes with the Wi-Fi network because there were several devices connected to the internet, and maybe an old Wi-Fi network caused some problems because there were several devices connected at once. For example, in the evenings, whereas what is ahead of us for the future? Well, there are many challenges, and the challenges that we will have to face will mainly regard security of the network, as we're going to see in a minute.
It seems that this is a sort of ad for a service that was just launched that couples Wi-Fi with broadband, name that I can't mention, of course. But Wi-Fi is very important. It's always been an important issue for the Wi-Fi's in the homes. And so we need to come back to this later. Now we have the next speaker, sociologist Stefano Epifani, international advisor and founder of the Digital International Institute. I see you. You are one of the most important observers on the digital world and sustainability, and you signed some important pieces of work, and also deputy ministers, like the deputy minister we heard this morning. So what is digital sustainability, and what are the priority themes or issues for the next few years? And these are contained in your manifesto. Quite simply, the issue is that when we speak about technology, the questions are not always the right ones, because in many contexts, what I see is that the maximum concentration, when we're asking ourselves whether artificial intelligence is good or bad, or whether big data is positive or negative, or whether social media are good or bad, well, it's as if these elements had their own lives. Now, thinking about the technologies in terms of digital sustainability means giving a direction to the technologies without wasting time wondering whether AI is good or bad, but asking oneself, how can we build an artificial intelligence that can actually be useful for the creation of a better world? Now, the concept of better is not a very clear-cut thought. So we need to flesh it out somehow. And the best element that we can use is when we reason in terms of sustainability. So the world is a better world if it's sustainable. And therefore, digital sustainability means taking into account within a complex system made up of the subsystems such as economy, society, and so on. Also the digital element. It is an element which contributes to the creation of a sustainable world, and therefore pursue the goals of sustainable development that were set by the United Nations. This is the concept of digital sustainability, a concept which can be described in terms of the context of reference and the events that go on around us. I'm going to come back to this issue in a minute because I think it's a very interesting one, but at this point I would move on to Stefano Quintarelli, who is with us from Milan, well, close to Milan. I was wondering whether it was closer to Padua or Milan, but perhaps Milan. Well, Stefano, my first question concerns the Immuni application, which represents an interesting issue because it brings together technological elements with privacy elements, collective participation, and so on. I don't know whether you saw the survey that we have launched. Half of the people who have answered have installed it. The other half says that basically they haven't installed it yet and they do not intend to do so. So what are we aiming for with this, and what are the problems that will be encountered, and how can we have this application work in a context like Italy, which is undoubtedly is not similar to what happens in China? We heard recently about the fact that this social monitoring was easy to roll out. So what is this application, and what are the problems, the expectations that come with it? Well, hello to everyone, first of all. It's a pity that half of the people haven't downloaded this application. There's a widespread perception that we have gone past the pandemic. The pandemic is behind our backs, but that's not so. Actually, we're not in the situation we were in a month and a half ago, but this is possible thanks to the fact that we were locked up at home and that we are learning social distancing and we're putting it into practice. A scientific article that was published a couple of days ago shows, over and above any doubt, any possible doubt, that the strength of the virus has not changed, has not weakened, it has changed. So with the heat, there are things that evaporate more quickly, and therefore contact with the surface is shorter. But we're not out of the tunnel. Antivirals won't have much effect. Perhaps if you take it before the lungs are involved, you'll have a better survival rate. But until we have a vaccine, we're still in this situation. And vaccines or group immunity can be reached not before a year from now. So it's a pity that people have not understood how important it is to have this app, this instrument that would enable us to support the work done by the doctors. this application, obviously, it's not a panacea. It doesn't tell you it doesn't tell you what you've done and so on, but it's useful. It has a very good purpose. From my standpoint, the fact is that it can stop the spreading of the spread of the virus. The virus spreads from one person to another, and if we can trace the people who have been in contact with someone who has the virus, we can we can track all the people that he was in contact with, and therefore check them out and see whether they have the virus as well. So this is an important dimension. The discussion was focused on this, on stopping the spread of the disease. Now, at the beginning of this event, I asked myself, who is working on this issue? I found out, and I started giving a hand. There's a group in London headed by Luca Mastrostefano, who is an Italian young man. We're working together, and we made a submission to the ministry on the 319 solutions that were presented, or applications that were presented. We were selected by the task force, and then we came up with another group, and we have both been asked to check the soundness of this solution, and Minister Pisano chose the other group, not us. But that's okay, because in any case, the two solutions are both technically viable, and obviously we're not there to measure the centimeters. So it's okay. Well, from a technical standpoint, Stefano, help us understand from a technical standpoint, what were the problems that you had to deal with since you developed one of the two solutions that were shortlisted. So what were the basic points? Well, there are two aspects. The first is that this instrument is supposed to be used for PANs, Personal Area Network, and not for making measurements. The relative signal strength indicator is the measurement of the signal, depends on the incidence angle, on the setting, on where the telephone is. Depends on where you're holding your phone. But from an epidemiological point of view, that is okay, because it's not important whether the distance is 1.5 meters or 1.8 meters. If I cough, it's the same. Our approach was a different one. So this was one of the problems, that is how to measure the distance. Well, we dealt with this issue by looking at all the measurements of the signals. That is, if we have 5 devices with so many measurements of the RS5 and how it varies in time, we concentrate this on the server and therefore make a trade-off on the distance or the uncertainty of the distance. But from the epidemiological standpoint, both are okay. Ours was more precise on the measurement, but the one that was chosen is okay just the same. The idea is to have a peer-to-peer architectural data, which is safer rather than having anonymous identities on a server. But then if you look at it closer, it's not that. But it's easier to have people accept it from the standpoint of an application for large numbers of people is okay. The choice was not a wrong one, because there's a communication aspect to it which is acceptable. Then iPhones, another aspect is that when iPhones are asleep, when they are off, they listen, but they don't transmit. So if I have an Android and an iPhone, the iPhone does not transmit, and therefore the Android doesn't see it. The Android transmits, and the iPhone sees it. The Android doesn't know it was close to an iPhone, whereas the iPhone knows that it was close to an Android. So these are peer-to-peer exchanges that may cause a problem, and this is why the API had to be introduced by Google in this case. So since we use a server, so when the iPhone says I'm next to an Android, it reports that to the server, and the server informs the Android. So our solution managed this aspect as well. And since that couldn't be done in a peer-to-peer architecture, the API by Google had to be used. However, the choice has been made, and that's okay. It's a pity. We mustn't. Ours is useful, and even the solution adopted is useful, because it can help out in this situation. We can make an intervention which is very targeted. These are epidemiological data which are very important, over and above the fact of stopping the spread of the disease. One other thing I would like to say is that we're faced, and this is a very severe aspect, and it wasn't pointed out enough. It is a bad thing that this choice of the API by Google and Apple should be restricted to the states, to the countries. It's the first time in history that we have an API, a function of an operational system, in all of our devices that can be used only by the states. It can't be used by anybody else. So nobody else can write a software that can see it. For instance, with the Android, we can see that the software that we download from the store is what we have on our device. But this is not possible for the iPhone, because you don't have access to those libraries. For the first time in history, therefore, we have a backdoor by the state which we carry around with us, and this is inadmissible, in my view. It's okay that the ministry uses the API, but it's not a good thing for these APIs to be restricted or reserved only for the states. Well, this was very clear. Thank you. There is historic discontinuity here that may have effects down the road, because who tells us that this won't be done for other functions in the future? This is something that is overlooked, and that's not a very good thing. It has been overlooked. Well, this was a twist which should set us all thinking. And a chapeau for your comment on the solution that was adopted.
Okay.
No, they didn't win. They were selected. This wasn't a game where there was a winner. It was just a selection. But in any case, I just wanted to congratulate you on your behavior, on your conduct. And now we have Antonio Nicita from Rome. He is an economist. He is an AGICOM inspector or commissioner, and he has been appointed during the COVID. Well, you have spoken about merit raised to the second power. This is the same for COVID. Well, during this period, you have spoken about the economic conditions and on the situation of fake news. And somebody said that the true virus is those who speak about, who promote fake news. And so I wanted to ask you, what have you learned from the study that you've carried out on fake news? And what about the algorithm that is for fact-checking? What can you tell us about that? Well, thank you, and congratulations for this initiative you're holding today, and congratulations to Namex. We not only we in Italy, but all the various institutions that have dealt with information or disinformation, well, we have found ourselves looking at what was happening in terms of information with regard to COVID. All the authorities that deal with communication asked the issuers, television and radio issuers that are regulated, to provide correct information on behavior, on the spread of the disease, on prophylaxis and so on. And as this information was circulated by the national and international bodies to inform citizens about the risks and also about the right type of behavior to be adopted and so on, well, all the authorities in the world, with a few exceptions like the United States, they all provided guidelines. Now, you know that most of the misinformation in the network and on the media, because also the traditional media circulated and are victims of disinformation, well, this induced us to do a focus on our observatory with regard to COVID. So what we discovered, and the data were then confirmed by the European Commission in a report that it published recently, what we observed is that misinformation, that is, organized strategies aimed and targeted at providing fake news, not just a simple fake news, but an organized initiative, well, this exploded. They increased incredibly during the COVID pandemic. It was a worldwide negative activity. They were organized actions at providing misinformation. We have a diagram. We developed a diagram published by our observatory, which is similar to the one that showed Maurizio Decina for traffic. And what we look at the rate of information compared to misinformation about coronavirus during the pandemic. And what we can see is that misinformation has increased, and the rate of misinformation that we measure is underestimated because we use an algorithm on only 7% of all the news that are actually spread through the media. Well, this percentage is quite significant because fake news will die very soon. It doesn't last long because it can be proven wrong very quickly, but it determined the political agenda on the day of reference, and then the following day that it disappears, it may be replaced by another just as bad piece of fake news. Now, what does this teach us? Something which is quite worrying. I'm saying this as a citizen, but also as an economist. Information is a basic asset, which is important for the working of the markets and for democracy. Now, if we are exposed to this, the EU identified 550 websites and that produce fake news. So they've shown that there is a huge production of news that would destabilize people. This is a fundamental issue which helps us understand that also health and health policies and also an emergency are the result of polarization. Other empirical studies that have been carried out in the United States. There's a beautiful study published by Kensko et al. That shows that depending on the political ideology, citizens will seem to have complied, more or less complied with the rules on social distancing, during the lockdown. So all this helps us understand that we need to do something about this. We need to have a discussion. We need to reflect on the organization of disinformation strategies in the digital era, because we have exceeded this limit of, and we're seeing that these analyses can break down society. This is the large production of misinformation about 5G and its relationship with the coronavirus. So misinformation about 5G in and of itself can create additional imbalances, disruptions. So it's important. Correct information, democracy, the design of policies and planning, and so on. We have measured a significant increase in all of this. One of the fake news spoke about using vitamins to prevent coronavirus. Well, it comes as no surprise that in March that there was an incredible increase in the sale of vitamins in Italy. The increase was more than 60% more up from the previous year. So fake news have this type of impact. Well, thank you. This is quite impressive. We have some time for a second round.
So I would like to ask you to just take a few minutes to answer. But before starting, just a picture that has become an icon of this moment. Everything will be fine. So who won? Between I stay home and everything will be fine. These are two slogans that will accompany us for some more time. Maurizio Decina, the question is it true that everything went well in this occasion? What are going to be the actual challenges in the Internet of Things? What are the next problems that we will have to face in the networks of the future? Well, thank you. First of all, a comment on Immuni. I've followed Immuni behind the scenes, along with the watchdog for privacy. There were a number of problems at the beginning, so the clinical diary, so these things have been eliminated. So the solution we have chosen today is definitely fair and was probably the only one that might be acceptable right now. The problem is not so much the tracing made with the app, or the tracing made with people. No tests are carried out in Lombardy right now. To get a test, you have to go to the hospital, and there's a lack of tests, there's a lack of manual tracing, because you can't trace people with an app, you trace people with people. So where are the 23,000 tracers we need to stop infections, to stop contagion? Can I see slide number 4, please? Slide number 4 shows that the architecture of the systems is very, very peculiar. Very much based on cloud. It is having some formidable evolutions. Microsystems, containers are being put in place. So this market is dominated by web scalers, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, who determine how the hardware of machines is made, and also the software of machines is made, in particular in data centers. And this is an epoch-making revolution that is, however, leading to a system that is tremendously complex, that we will serve not only human beings, but also the Internet of Things. And here comes the actual problem, creating a new network that has not only the 7 billion, 10 billion human beings, hopefully in the future, but the sensors that will have to be put inside the network. So the mobile system, compared with the Wi-Fi dual core, has some additional assets because it guarantees mobility. It has this control arm out of the band that is increasing resilience to IT security. Slide number 5, please. Slide number 5 shows that the challenge for the future is that of looking, on the one hand, at cybersecurity. The perimeter of cybersecurity of the 5G system is broadening because the 5G structure is not made by human people only, but by things. In the 5G network, well, you risk human life, really. There will be autonomous driving, drones, factory robots, remote operation of machinery. Well, this needs low latency, and this becomes a very important vulnerability. And the price of this is human life for the first time in the history of ICTs. Could you please put this slide back on? Slide number 5. This shows not only cybersecurity, but also two big problems regarding these networks and the networks where things and human beings interact. So privacy and data integrity. We are discovering that the oil of the 21st century is data. So data are becoming more and more important in this framework. And the same is true for privacy and the profiling of customers. This should be supervised very closely by authorities. So cybersecurity, privacy, and data integrity, these are the three challenges for the future networks. What's the scenario ahead of us? Well, if you could please put on slide number 6. This is one of the most interesting slides in terms of the development of the internet. So you can see in this slide, borrowed from Andrea Renda in Brussels, you can see the technology stack. So AI, 5G, blockchain, internet protocols, level 3, level 4, and then apps. But what happens with 5G? I'm putting together all the data made available by a business, by a supermarket, by a shopping mall. Well, this data is precious, and to guarantee ownership of this data, the idea would be that of adopting blockchain protocols, for example, for guaranteeing the ownership of such data before starting the content applications and services. And this is something very interesting as a scenario that will be widely debated in the future. I firmly believe in the use of blockchain as an instrument to guarantee data integrity and the data ownership of the future. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you. Stefano Epifani. Stefano, are you there? So how do we apply the concept of digital sustainability? Of course, we have to be short because we have a few minutes left. Well, there's a very close relationship. Suffice it to look at the three big themes that have been addressed recently. So the contract tracing app, smart working, and e-learning. So when we plan a system, when we design a system or a solution, we have got two options. We should do that thinking only in terms of technology without considering how such technology can have an impact on the different aspects addressed by technology, or considering the technological aspect and combining it with all the other elements that have an impact on sustainability. When we talk about telework, and we often confused smart working with telework, which is not the same thing. We haven't done smart working here. We're simply taking people and left them home, and we told them what we were doing in the office. You're going to do that from your places. So, of course, this has saved us somehow, but it's also very clear that if we want to think in terms of sustainability, which is not only environmental sustainability, but social sustainability, we have to rethink several processes to make sure that agile work is possible, to make sure that the work-life balance is not destroyed. We should make sure that people can interact also with children, for example, that are home following their lessons. So people said, is it better e-learning or classroom-based learning? Well, it doesn't make any sense to focus on this distinction, since it wasn't possible to attend classes. Well, in September, we're going to go back to school. We will have to manage blurring mechanisms because there will be partial lockdowns, there will be children that will be quarantined, there will be a drama from this standpoint. So we either understand that we have to use technology to find a balance between e-learning or classroom-based learning. Otherwise, we will just argue about what's good and what's bad. And last but not least, contact tracing. Well, we suffered the same problem. You, Cristoforo, were saying that I'm staying in and everything will be fine as one. But how can we consider this slogan to be the winner when thousands of people have died? Everything would go well, end up well, if we stayed in a following phase, if we used contact tracing systems better. So in essence, let's try to understand that sustainability means to implement solutions that are redressing the balance between the different elements at stake. So with respect to contact tracing, we have all lost because regardless of some initial choices, the debate has focused with a very strong responsibility of some virologists or some doctors that have defined privacy as being just an excuse. Well, we have polarized between is it better to protect privacy or to protect one's health, but it's clear that if I ask a question like this, people will say, well, health is better. It's better to have health without privacy. But it was enough to say that by using certain technology that Stefano has mentioned earlier, we can combine these two things. We can combine privacy with health. If we made this choice, and this is a flaw of the political class, because when a call was made, organized to obtain support, they needed to be clearer. Well, it was also a flaw of the technicians that have proposed two different mechanisms. Well, actually, when you go to a doctor and ask for treatment, you expect one treatment to be proposed and not two different ones. Well, it's exactly the same thing. So this has led to an endless struggle. Stefano is right. We have been defeated. The state has been defeated because it doesn't define the sustainability parameters, economic and social alike, of a contact tracing application that is necessary to guarantee the health of our citizens. If we thought in terms of sustainability, maybe the government would have given clearer indications. The experts would have followed those indications. We must not forget that when the application was chosen, it wasn't using using the peer-to-peer mechanism that was used when Google and Apple have implemented the solution that we were de facto forced to use. Well, in this case, I would argue that the platform capitalism has outperformed the supervision system because they have chosen a technology that is closer to the solutions that are focusing more on the protection of the privacy of our citizens. I'm in the working group from Colombia, the Colombian task force that is working on these solutions. Well, in a context like Colombia, using applications like these is particularly dangerous. Well, you get to Colombia very slowly. It's a stepwise agreement, and in every of this step, we lose a piece of freedom. So sustainability should not be considered as a driver in the choice of economic and social solutions, because contact tracing stripped of treatment and control has led us to choose solutions that people do not trust to implement. So the result is we'll never get to that percentage of people, provided that is necessary, of course, because we have adopted an epidemiological approach. But if we reasoned in terms of technological analysis, are we sure that such a high number of users is necessary? Otherwise, I should think about tracing carriers or teachers, 100 people, or delivery people. So maybe I could manage the load of traced people in an optimized manner, but this requires a broader approach, which is not only technological, it is not only epidemiological, it's not only social. Sustainability means combining all these visions in operational feasibility. Well, if you're interested, you can read your book. People can read your book. Well, Stefano Quintarelli, I would have liked to spend half an hour with you talking about your book on intangible capitalism that confirm many of the things we have been seeing today with COVID-19. Unfortunately, we have only a few minutes left. So to sum up, just one question. This is maybe one of the things that has impressed me the most. Everyone talks about web tax or measures to take action. You are proposing a solution that is very different, a solution that you refer to as a gradual right, a ladder-like approach. What do you mean by that? How many hours do I have? I thought about 30 minutes, but they told me we have just a couple of minutes. Maybe I can ask an easier question. Well, I really agree with what Stefano said. I have a Colombian brother because I grew up in Colombia, and my brother has actually Colombian citizenship. We talk about regulation of platforms. Then there's the law on copyright, no need to talk about that. But I think we are making a mistake believing that rules are necessary black or white. Free speech doesn't mean free reach. Freedom of expression doesn't mean that you can speak to 90 million people. Well, in the world we had categories. Well, if you go to a cafe with your friends, you can say whatever you want, but if you speak in public and you are a broadcaster, of course, it's a different kettle of fish. The same is true for an influencer on Twitter that has 20 million followers. So I think we should determine rules based on the reach of individual people. We are trying to understand what's the meaning of things. There's a law that will be approved tomorrow, that will be passed tomorrow, having filters against pornography that are active on all connections whatever pornographic content is delivered, but how can you see what's in a HTTPS? Well, the idea of saying, let's implement rules, let's enforce rules with no discrimination, without hearing experts, is something that cannot work. We need a gradual approach in rules and in the implementation of the rules. And then I will let you read my book because it will be too long. Well, the term of having a regulatory ladder, it means having a gradual approach. Everything is in colors. It's not everything black or white. There are problems regarding speed every time we digitize an operation, and I've explained that very clearly in the book. Every time I digitize an operation, we give it a scale and a speed that is definitely higher than what humans have. So speed and scale are incredibly higher and impossible to calculate. So using connections with AI is causing mistakes. We know that. So we need to be able to manage these mistakes caused by analysis carried out by AI, and we must have some mechanisms to make sure that the management and the remedy of these mistakes is compatible with analogical solutions. So there's a problem of scale, there's a problem of quality, and this is one of the things you can read in my book. Please buy my book on Amazon whenever you want, not necessarily on Amazon. Well, go also to a local bookshops, to a local bookshop, to understand what's the relationship between capital and work. Antonio, last word to you for this last session. And mine is a provocation. What about your proposal? Is it still topical, unifying all regulatory authorities? You are an interim commissioner, so you can answer more freely.
Well, thank you. In my view, the interesting things that all of the other speakers said show that what I said, the provocation I made more than a year and a half ago, well, the more time goes by, the more it becomes topical. My proposal in that case, and still today, concerned also the Italian situation. We see how difficult it is as a result of the political evolution to appoint an authority after a year their term has expired. So we have two authorities that are or will be the result of a convergence because of all of the things we've said today, that is processing of data from the privacy standpoint, and that seeing that as an economic element, as something that can give you an economic advantage. So my proposal was that of imagining that the two authorities should be merged and therefore start what Stefano Quintarelli was saying, and that is putting together different skills, disciplinary skills, in order to manage the trade-offs. This would be fundamental. Maurizio Decina showed us that in the context of 5G, or China puts these things together. They put together data processing with the identification of blockchains and so on, the ownership of the data, so as to see how to develop markets that can go on being competitive. And all this comes under the principle that the way in which we are profiled with our data, well, this has an impact on the selection of the news that we receive and has an impact on pluralism. So there are several reasons that speak in favor of this hypothesis. And if I'm somewhat presumptuous, after I launched this idea in Italy, there were some polemics, but then the Australian authorities said something similar. And also in the UK, they have adopted this possibility of identifying a single mechanism. The Stiglitz Center, University of Chicago, issued a report that says the same thing. And the Digital Service Act puts together all of these elements. So I think that if Italy, well, Cristoforo, you know this very well. When AGICOM was set up, and it was one of the first authorities, it was one of the first to be a convergent authority of bringing together electronic communication with radio, television communications. The new digital convergence comes through a multi-dimensional reading of figures in our society. And to do this, we need to have independent authorities that should interact with the technical experts and discuss the issues you mentioned and that our colleagues mentioned. And so I'd like to say something about some data. From our vantage point, the data that Maurizio showed, that is the traffic peaks in mobile telephony and landlines. This is another piece of study that we need to do, that is cross-reference the data on the connections of Italian addresses with a number of people who make up the various households to understand how Wi-Fi is used. And then the schools. The AGICOM website published the map of schools, and only 7% of all schools have fiber connection. But if we have to adopt distance learning, then there's going to be a problem with the internet connections. These are issues that cover different areas and different aspects. So my answer is this: I would be very happy if we had one authority, a convergent authority in Italy. A rhetorical question. Well, I endorse your answer. Thank you, Maurizio Decina, Epifani, Quintarelli, and Nicita. Thanks to everyone. At this point, we have one last piece of advertisements, after which we will say goodbye.
The intelligent world has arrived. Huawei Enterprise Business Group adheres to the platform plus ecosystem strategy and is working with partners to provide ubiquitous connectivity and intelligence for government and enterprise customers. The digital platform aims to support customers' digital transformation and to bring digital to every organization. Reputable companies around the world are choosing Huawei as their partner in digital transformation. Enterprise business is becoming the main engine of Huawei's growth.
SonicWall Cloud App Security is designed for cloud productivity suites such as Office 365, providing complete visibility and control by integrating with Office 365's native APIs.
Every digital business operates on a precise formula. Success requires staying connected to customers, suppliers, and partners across billions of devices and data lines. Instantly responding to changing business demands. Managing and protecting vast amounts of data wherever it goes. And delivering innovative products and services at speeds never before imagined. Because success in business is the sum of many variables, but connecting them all is one constant. CenturyLink connectivity, cloud, and security solutions help you transform now via our global enterprise network. Digital plus business equals more innovation faster.
Bentornati.
Welcome back. We've come to the end, but before passing the floor to Undersecretary Manzella, let's just summarize what we said today and the key words that emerged. I have written down these words. The first is modernization combined with digitalization, the digital, therefore, sustainability combined with equity, and the third, resilience combined with new generation networks. At this point, I would like to apologize for being late in our connection with the Undersecretary. So welcome, Undersecretary. Can you hear me? I apologize for the slight delay. No, no problem. On the one hand, it was better because I was able to listen. On the other, it was worse because I am worried with the types of conclusions that I can give to this special audience. Well, I joined you only during the last hour and a quarter, so I didn't hear the previous presentations. But I would like to go back to some words that I heard: revolution, experimentalism, coming out of one's comfort zone, the cultural aspect of transformation, and sustainability as a continuum or constant evaluation or assessment of trade-offs, and also the idea of going beyond, in the name of technological transformation, going beyond the way the authorities are structured. So we are touching on matters that impose major choices, and that we must discuss the great problems that are brought to the fore, and the clashes, let's say, concerning polarization, such as privacy versus efficacy. Well, this is because we're on new ground. We are in uncharted waters, and the studies on artificial intelligence that says. Empoli a year ago said, well, with regard to studies on AI, we're not lagging behind China, the United States, and so on. But from a quantitative point of view, the European universities have been studying artificial intelligence in great depth. But what's the difference? The difference is that they look at the ethical aspects, the ethical issues, whereas other universities are focused on how to use AI in the economy, in the business world, and so on. In Europe, the focus is on whether it is right or not, how far can we go, what types of publications, what types of work can we do. So this, if you will, is typical of Europe. When Europe has to come to grips with change, we question ourselves with regard to rights and duties and so on. And this explains why the debate has gone in this direction. And it explains also why, faced with a vital debate of great depth, the government was not capable of immediately responding, of immediately setting the rules and so on. and it has debated the issues more than coming up with solutions. And then there's the issue of the great changes that have occurred. The number of people who do smart working has gone from thousands to the millions in a matter of a month. But at times it's not just smart working, but adapting to an emergency situation. But it's interesting also to see the options, seeing the possibilities that are available. And as Mr. Dacina was saying, it's interesting to see the way people have reacted to this emergency. So what is the reaction of the political world with regard to these matters? Well, as far as growth is concerned, we must comply with the indications set by Europe with regard to digitalization as being, together with the green transition, other key issues concerning the growth model. We need to comply with the European indications. And so we need to invest in Industry 4.0 and boost the small enterprises. I went to Viscon here that produces biscuits that are known by everybody. Well, their oven was purchased thanks to Industry 4.0 that has improved their efficiency. Well, we need to digitalize the small and medium-sized enterprises. We need to do cultural work, promote knowledge. There are these parties, small and medium-sized industries that need to be revitalized because there is an imbalance. There are some companies that are very much advanced, others are lagging far behind, and this requires investment, requires spreading the digital culture within these small companies, taking advantage of this moment, that is, of this point in time when things have to change, and therefore we have moved away from theory during the past few months, and we have delved into action, into implementation. Companies have understood, the business world has understood that a lot of their competitiveness and resilience is closely linked to the digital world. So in my view, we need to focus on 2 points. The first is strengthen the relationships between the state and the regions. I am very impressed by the fact that Emilia-Romagna should take an initiative on data, such an important initiative. Well, this is because I come from a personal experience as a councillor in a region, and here there is something that we can work on. When the issue of digitization, which is common to all the administrative levels and tiers, well, we must put all the administrative tiers in a position to be digitized and in a comprehensive manner and in a consistent manner, so that there aren't any differences and nobody goes one way, somebody goes one way, somebody goes the other. Well, this concept that I'm very interested in with regard to the new European industrial policy are the ecosystems, industrial ecosystems. We must not miss out on the opportunity that the head of the Commission on Industry, there should be somebody like Thierry Breton, who's not only a businessman himself, but he's an expert in digital business. And so he has the right idea of how this development should occur, starting or moving from the digital world. He has introduced the idea of the industrial digital ecosystem, the digital system, where startups and small businesses and the research world interact with each other, not in a physical premise, in a physical building, let's say, but linked up via the internet. And so we are working on competitiveness by focusing on the practical aspect, and this concept of ecosystem, industrial ecosystem, must be put into practice. And then we must pay close attention to small and medium-sized enterprises. It is clear that in this new context, small and medium-sized enterprises must play an extremely important role. Thank you. What about something about the digital networks, the agenda of the government? What can we expect for the rest of the year? A summary as to what we can expect in the next few months from the government. I think that there is a great focus on speeding up the ultra broadband. We know that we're lagging behind for a number of reasons. Reasons linked first and foremost to the complexity of the administration, how complex our administration system is, and the fact that there are 100,000 permits and authorizations that have to be taken out, and that they're not properly organized. So if there's something that's of strategic importance, then we need to have that also the organizational aspects must be strategic and streamlined. And as the state railway system, cultural heritage, the regions, the municipalities, each must feel that they are part of a national strategic project. If we don't have this, if individual permits and authorizations are considered to be seen in their individuality, they will produce delays. So therefore, we need to work on this. A lot has been done in recent months. The Ministry of Economic Development is looking into this, and also politics is engaged in this, and a lot of the delay that has built up will be done away with, because great attention is being paid to this aspect, and there is great awareness in there is awareness with respect to simplification.
Against the backdrop, there's the question of how to realize the single network. Is a very important thing. There are several options, as you know. The government is considering all these options over the past few weeks. So we're now coming to the decision time. The third point I would like to mention regards vouchers. So a big operation to bring certain categories closer to the services offered by the internet. Categories that are in need of these services. I usually go around looking at what happens in the business environment, and Sometimes firms are complaining about the fact that they are poorly competitive because connection speed is not comparable to that of other European competitors. It is important to have stronger connections also for schools, and there's a portion of our population that is still excluded from this key service for everyone's life. Then if you ask me what I would like to have started as an initiative, well, Quintarelli mentioned that the difference in speed between analog institutions and the digital world. So we have to reinforce the ability to metabolize technology, metabolize demand and needs.
La legittimazione della pubblica amministrazione e quindi dello Stato in un momento in cui di Stato ce n'è bisogno.
We need a state, we need a country, because this thing has made us understand how much we need the state, how much we need the government. We need it because it contributes to the resilience of every one of us as individual citizens, as businesses, as institutions. So the work that should be done is to reinforce the public administration. It's a humongous task, and in many of your contributions, I've heard the need for this, and it would be great to have digital institutions. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you also for your patience in following us this morning. So now we have truly come to the end. Some housekeeping announcements for the afternoon. The workshops will start around 2 p.m. So log on to meeting.namex.it to find the link for your connection. So these are all top-notch workshops with speakers coming from different parts of the world. And finally, I would like to remind you that after the credits, you're all invited to a virtual lunch offered by Namex. Don't miss this opportunity, so stay with us for lunch. Let me just conclude by thanking the control room and all the people that have helped us technically, and for all of you who have stayed with us from your places, from your offices for so long. Sorry for this 15-minute delay. Thank you all, and see you next year, and see you this afternoon for the workshops.